Tonight, Hurricane Earl passing close to Bermuda. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Weather bulletin for September 9th. Around the tropics right now, we have 3 tropical cyclones active and 1 hurricane strength storm now. Earl, a category 2, possibly a high-end one at that, speeding off towards the northeast past Bermuda. Kay also made landfall earlier on in the central Baja California peninsula as a category 1 hurricane and has weakened to a tropical storm. Day 101 of hurricane season, Earl there, passing very close to Bermuda as mentioned. Danielle has turned post-tropical in the very high latitudes, and 2 other areas of interest that we're monitoring, one of them very closely at 60%. Day 118 of the Eastern Pacific, and Kay is just off the coast now after briefly striking the Baja California peninsula. Will eventually weaken and turn pretty much on itself back towards the south, but it could still affect even Southern California perhaps. Muifa was named actually in the last 24 hours and is headed towards the Ryukyu Islands. We've also got 2 other areas of interest there, and the remnants of Hilimnor are still active at 62 degrees north. And in the Indian Ocean, we still have an area of interest at 10% off the eastern coast of India. Low chance of development, and those chances seem to be almost completely extinguished by this point. At least for this system. Satellite imagery shows off Earl pretty well today. A rather large system, certainly takes up a good chunk of the western Atlantic. Bermuda inside one of its, or many of its bands, probably getting significant to high-end, maybe tropical storm conditions. They shouldn't get hurricane winds. And Danielle, you may have seen well off to the north. Here is Kay, looking much less as well as it did previously. The eye is gone, and its center now is moving off the western coast of northern Mexico. A lot of its influence though being felt in the northern part of Mexico inland and in the southern United States. There's a close-up view of Kay there with the infrared and visible hybrid imagery, and you can see that some of the orange colors even getting into Arizona with its preliminary bands already past Phoenix. There's some visible imagery, and look back towards the east. Let's switch back to infrared again, and you can see the progress of Earl there, looking pretty good when you look at that imagery, wrapping itself round nicely. The eye doesn't look to be completely closed or complete, but it's pretty much almost there and certainly has a chance to become a major hurricane shortly. There's the other area of interest at 60%. The convection is displaced from the center to the northeast, but it is a lot of convection that's being blown up and still has a decent chance. Further south, you may have seen the other area of interest there, and there is the remnants of Danielle way up there in the northern latitudes. It's now getting towards 50 degrees north if it hasn't already, the same latitude as the northern part of Newfoundland, and no surprise that it's now post-tropical. Muifa has been developing, has been rumbling along there, gradually moving towards the west-northwest and strengthening a little bit during that time, but not that much. We are expecting to see more rapid intensification happen fairly soon as it approaches the Yayama Islands. Looking at the wider picture in the Indian Ocean, things are looking fairly quiet. No real signs of that disturbance, which you've sort of got a low pressure center just off the coast of Odisha right now, but no real signs of development. Southern Hemisphere, there's a little bit of an outage on Himawari 8 today, but the rest of the region you can see there around Australia, usual frontal systems moving through the area, and for New Caledonia as well. I imagine it's been a pretty wet day today. So let's go to the current sea surface temperatures. K is very much on borrowed time, with sea surface temperatures now barely 22 or 23 degrees Celsius, so it will turn post-tropical very soon. Further south, it's cold trail quite visible there. Earl is doing well over decent temperatures, around 29 degrees, possibly 28 certainly for a little while yet, as it speeds off towards the northeast. And Danielle, of course, now scrubbed from the screen, probably over about 15 to 16 degrees Celsius waters at this point. Western Pacific, looking at the Indian Ocean as well, you can see over 30 degrees there. The Western Pacific, as mentioned, where Muifa is, you can see it there, over 30 degrees Celsius in one or two little areas. There's a little bit of a cool pool as it approaches the southern Ryukyu Islands because of Hinamnor last week, but as it heads towards maybe Taiwan or eastern China, temperatures will remain marginally favourable all the way up and possibly a little bit beyond Shanghai. So certainly conditions will be potentially in this storm's favour. Anomalies are quite a bit above average where Muifa is at the moment, below average where Hinamnor's put its trail through, and in the Atlantic very much above average where Earl is right now, getting towards 3 degrees above as it approaches the northeast, and towards Newfoundland even 5 degrees higher than normal, extremely high anomalies there. Oceanic heat content looks very good, but there's no storms to capitalise on it right now in the Caribbean or in the Gulf or off the coast of the Bahamas, so that's perhaps a little bit of a relief. In the Western Pacific also large areas there, and Muifa is sort of on the edge of it. Eastern Pacific not really producing much energy, certainly not where K is, not a chance, but potentially some energy still for some later systems. So the computer models, you can see Earl there moving off northeastwards, becomes a category 3 quite easily there, and you can also see the other systems, but Earl swirls around not far from Newfoundland, could even deliver tropical storm force winds, but it will be post-tropical by then. Briefly, you can see that other system that we have a 60% chance on. It's not got very long to capitalise on its current conditions, 24 hours at most. Is that third system behind it? GFS isn't very fond of it, but I have to tell you that other models are showing something a little bit more than that. The Eastern Pacific, there's K moving off. Tropical storm force winds could be felt in Southern California, moving off towards the Channel Islands and then westwards and then down towards the south. Its remnants continuing to live on for a while. You'll also see towards the end of that loop there another tropical storm trying to form by the end of day 5, not far from Oaxaca and Chiapas in Mexico. As you can see, there it is, just at the end there towards the right hand side. Looking towards the Western Pacific, what happens to Muifa? Well, here is a gradual strengthening trend. JWC I think still has a high-end category 3 on their forecast. GFS not so sure, and has the storm stalling, would you believe, and possibly doing a bit of a loop. Hinamnor vibes certainly with that one, although it will be much smaller. And to the east, another system forming on the GFS model and becoming what looks like a typhoon there. Yes, quite clearly. Very far to the east, probably still in the Western Pacific, but quite close to the international dateline. Here's some rainfall estimates for Muifa, and with the GFS expecting the storm to stall for a while, they're going pretty crazy on the rain expectations again, just like they did with the earlier runs of Hinamnor. But let's take a look at the land areas that are affected. All those red areas there, that's over 10 inches of rain possible, 250 millimeters. Northern Taiwan there, 6 inches more. For some of the Ayama Islands could get towards 20 inches, that's 500 millimeters. And in parts of China there, maybe 12 or 13 inches near Shanghai, and that would be over 300 millimeters. So potentially another big rain event on the way to areas that have already been slammed with substantial rainfall from the typhoon that we just had last week. So keep your eyes peeled on that one, and once again we could be seeing rainfall becoming a bigger threat than the winds. Here's a real close-up of the northern part of Baja California into Southern California, and you can see there in terms of rain totals, expectations aren't quite as high, possibly because rain has already started falling over the region, but we are still expecting possibly 4 inches along the Interstate 8 corridor, and that would be substantial, particularly still in that area, and 7 inches in some parts of Mexico there, which would be 175 millimeters. Los Angeles looking at half an inch, San Diego at around 0.8. So K's remnants, to me, looks like for those coastal areas, tropical storm force winds could be a bigger impact than the rainfall, and certainly something that we've not seen in quite some time. The threat, the potential possibility of tropical storm force winds from an actual tropical cyclone for Southern California. Let's check the longer range, day 5 through 10. Not much going on in the Atlantic, so we'll look at the East Pacific. There's a brief hurricane spin up there that makes landfall in Mexico, and I think its remnants continue westwards and might try and form again there. Another area of interest that forms right at the end there of that loop as well. So potentially 2 tropical cyclones that try to materialize in the course of the next 10 days. Of course, the further out we go with these forecasts, the less certain, much less certain it gets. What about Typhoon Muifa as it would be by that point? GFS takes it northwards at first and then starts to turn towards the west, so Shanghai looks like it misses the worst impacts again, and then off towards the north once again and eventually through North Korea. So that's an interesting change to the track compared to yesterday. The other typhoon stalls out to sea quite a bit, and then this enormous system that comes in afterwards. Look how large the influence of that one would be. That's within the 10-day period, so it cannot be fully discounted, but an extremely strong category 1 there, extremely large category 1. That's all the important stuff done and dusted, so you can scan that barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store. We have all of our usual items and animations on request, and the Still Waiting for Hone t-shirt. In the silly range then, day 10 to 16, we look at the Eastern Pacific once again. Not much going on in the Atlantic still, and in the Eastern Pacific just 1 or 2 weak systems that possibly interact with each other there, and the Baja California peninsula might get another weak landfall. But apart from that, really nothing much to talk about in the Eastern Pacific, so I guess we'll just show that rolling through again. And still the potential for more tropical storms in this Eastern Pacific season, telling us that it's not done yet. Western Pacific, what happens with this enormous typhoon? Well, it grows in size and strength. Look how large it gets and how strong it gets. Category 3, and then slams into Japan. That is extremely long range, so no guarantee at all that that will happen or anything like it. But on that scenario, that would be a historic landfall in Japan, and probably one of the worst in the last half century. In the southern South China Sea, a system forms towards the end there as well, becomes a tropical storm and then possibly a typhoon, but that is way out at this point. Well, on September the 9th, 1985, it was the Eastern Pacific that was alive on this day. Hurricane Rick was a Category 4 right now, pictured. Sandra was a Category 3 behind it, and Pauline was ahead of it towards the end of its life as a tropical storm. Tropical Depression 6 had also formed in the Eastern Atlantic. It wouldn't go on to develop any further and remained without an actual name. Western Pacific and the North Indian Ocean were both eerily quiet on this day in 1985. Back to today, and next up on the Atlantic naming list now is Fiona. In the Eastern Pacific it will be Lester, and in the Central Pacific we're still waiting for Hone, although models showing that there might be just a slight glimpse of life on their runs near Hawaii. In the Western Pacific though, the next name on the list now is Merbok. In the North Indian Ocean it's Sitrang, and any of these could become our 56th storm of the year 2022. In general across the world, in terms of accumulated cyclone energy, we're still a little bit behind the curve. In the Australian region, the next name is Darian, the Southwest Indian Ocean Ashley, and in the South Pacific, Harley. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.